Hey, what's going on, guys? At UFC 296, Leon Edwards defeated Colby Covington to retain his welterweight title, and we thought we already knew who the #1 contender is. That's Belal Muhammad. He was already promised a title shot by Dana White, and Dana White at the post-fight presser was asked about this, among other things that we're going to look at in this video. And I'm going to prove today that Dana White privilege does exist, because what Dana White admits at this post-fight presser, discusses at this post-fight presser, it's just embarrassing for even a shred of meritocracy for the UFC and for the welterweight division. And also in this post-fight presser, if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't know, but Dana White actually exposes Colby Covington for something he's been doing, and I've been saying he's been doing for the past 2 years. Dana White almost comes right out and says it, but just stops just short. But if you didn't pay close attention, you wouldn't have picked up on it. And we're also going to look at the hypocrisy of Dana White. We're going to look back at some older post-fight pressers, because the way Dana White is talking about Belal Muhammad versus the way he's talking about Colby Covington in the past is just disgusting, and it's embarrassing, and it shows blatant preferential treatment for Colby Covington. And I'm going to expose it in this video, as well as some other things that he said that were just downright egregious. And I know Dana is a habitual liar. He's a promoter. But some of the things that he said in this press conference were just downright disgusting, and we're going to break it all down in this video. Originally, this video was going to be kind of going through all the good information from the UFC 296 presser, but once I saw the things that Dana was saying about Colby and Belal and, Leon Edwards' next title shot, I knew I had to make this video kind of revolve around Dana White privilege, because it's so apparent in the way he discusses both Belal Muhammad and Colby Covington at this presser, and I wanted to expose it. Now, before we get into actually watching the post-fight presser, I hate to keep harping on this, but I just have to very quickly break this down. Colby Covington got a welterweight title shot, sitting out for almost 2 years, from March of 2022 to then December of 2023. He sat out. He had no wins over the current top 15 ranked welterweights. He was 2-2 in his last 4 fights, with 2 losses in 2 title fights, 1 via stoppage. And in the meantime, Belal Muhammad was on a 10-fight unbeaten streak. His last 4 opponents were all ranked, I believe, in the top 10 as of a couple days ago. I don't know if the rankings have since changed, but either way, there was really no conversation about who truly deserved the title shot. But ultimately, we saw what happened. Colby Covington got the title shot. But it was said at UFC 288, and we're going to take a look at that clip in this video as well, that Belal Muhammad was guaranteed the shot if he beat Gilbert Burns. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, because Dana White, I know he lies, but I'm tired of him selling all the fans wolf tickets to get them invested in pay-per-views and pretend like certain fights are important when truly they're not, and he's just flat out lying to the fan base. But first off, I want to start off by watching some of the UFC 296 post-fight presser, because Dana starts to make a little bit of excuses for Colby Covington, and you can tell he's kind of dissatisfied with Colby's performance. But then he kind of gets into a little bit more about the welterweight division. Let's just start listening.
I guess my take on it is, and you guys can let me know what you think, but when you're 35 years old and or any age in this sport, you're like, yeah, I'm going to wait. Waiting is never a good idea in this sport.
So I don't understand. He waited for 2 years and you still gave him a title shot, even though he's on 1 fight winning streak. It just made no sense here, but I have to point that out, that hypocrisy.
Sport doesn't wait for anybody. And I think he looked slow tonight. He got out wrestled. Leon looked good. Leon looked fast. Looked like he had trouble dealing with his speed, and then getting out wrestled too. And not to mention the fact that Leon absolutely destroyed that leg too. Yeah.
So just kind of saying Colby looked old, he looked slow. It almost diminishes the win for Leon Edwards, but I do agree with Dana here. But this isn't the worst part. He gets into, someone asked him a follow-up question about Colby waiting around. Let's listen to what the question is and what he has to say.
So we talk about him waiting. I think the thought was along the way that you guys were kind of holding him out for a title shot. Were there other fights you wanted for?
Listen to that very carefully. You guys were holding him out for a title shot. You guys, as in the UFC, told Colby to sit out to wait for this title shot. Listen to what Dana has to say.
I don't ever have anybody wait in this business, man. This is not a business that waits for you.
So I don't have anyone wait. That is code word for I offered Colby Covington fights in the meantime. He wasn't willing to accept those fights. And eventually it lined up because we didn't have, you know, a number one contender we were satisfied with. And then Colby weighed in as a backup for UFC 286. So we gave him a shot anyway because we thought, okay, this is the biggest fight we can make for the welterweight division that can sell the most pay-per-view buys. That's essentially what he's saying. Colby waited it out and got a title shot, but he goes on a little bit more. You'll see here in a second.
Yeah. Your windows are very short. And you never know, once you start getting up into your mid-30s, when you're going to show up and just not look like you anymore.
Yeah.
So there you go. Talking about Colby, 35 years old, not showing up for the fight because it was an embarrassing performance. I think Dana White was a bit annoyed by Colby's performance because here Dana is giving one of the most undeserved title shots in history, and then Colby shows up and really doesn't even fight. And it's probably because he sat out for so long in witness protection. But the next question is Belal Muhammad the number one contender? Which we all know Dana White has promised in the past that Belal Muhammad with the win over Gilbert Burns was the number one contender. Let's see what Dana has to say. Of course he's going to say Belal's the number one contender, right? Let's take a listen.
Belal Muhammad was the backup this week. I think you said he's next.
Also points out that Belal was a backup. That's a very key component.
Next, it still seemed like the next fight.
I'm not even thinking about that right now.
Yeah.
He's not even thinking about that right now. He's not even thinking about that right now. What's crazy to me is he can't even commit that Belal is the number one contender and that Belal is getting the next title shot. And you might say, Joey, he always does this. I don't make fights the night of the fights, blah, 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 so on and so forth. If you were saying that, you're a Dana White sycophant. Because while that's partially true, let's rewind back to UFC 286. Let's take a look at UFC 286 real quick. That's actually the wrong one, 286. Let's see what he has to say when he's asked the very same question regarding Colby Covington. Asked if he's next in line. This is the same thing. This is after Leon Edwards defeats Kamaru Usman at UFC 286. This is the post-fight presser. Let's take a listen to this.
Obviously, we had Colby Covington cage side. He wants to fight Leon in July. I'm curious if that's a fight you're interested in, or do you need to see how it plays
Just keep in mind, this is the night of the fight.
out?
Yeah, I don't know when we'll do it, but yeah, that's the fight that makes sense. And Colby came here and cut weight, you know, and did everything to be here for this fight. He deserves the fight.
He deserves to fight. He showed up. He cut the weight. He made the weight as a backup. He deserves to fight. Well, guess who did the very same thing, but it also won a 10-fight unbeaten streak? That's Belal Muhammad, who's also beat ranked contenders. That's Belal Muhammad. And he goes on a little bit more here. Listen.
So it's Leon Edwards.
Not to mention the fact that he's, you know, the second or third best guy in the world.
So it is Leon versus Colby next.
Yeah.
So commits to it, no problem. I'll commit to Colby getting the title shot. He showed up and made the weight. Well, Belal showed up and made the weight for UFC 296. Look at this blatant hypocrisy. He can't even commit to Belal getting a title shot, but look at him the night of UFC 286, immediately committing to Colby Covington getting the next title shot. If that isn't preferential treatment, if that isn't Dana White privilege, I don't know what is. I literally don't know what is. I mean, that is clear as day. That is an apples-to-apples situation. Dana White is asked about Belal. Keep in mind, Belal on a 10-fight unbeaten streak, beat 4 top 10 ranked contenders in his last 4 fights, at least as of a week ago. I don't know if the rankings have shifted around, but at least top 15 ranked opponents. Colby had been sitting out for over a year at this point, at the time of the UFC 296 or 286 press conference, and had one fight in a row, won one fight in a row against Jorge Masvidal, and was 2-2 in his last 4. 2 of them being losing title fights against Kamaru Usman. His biggest accomplishment was losing fights to Kamaru Usman. Dana White has no problem committing to him getting a title shot. And let's rewind back to UFC 288. This was when Belal Muhammad stepped in on short notice to help save UFC 288 because some fights fell off of UFC 288. It was looking like a very lackluster card. So Dana White decided, make Gilbert Burns versus Belal Muhammad. We'll make it a 5-round co-main event in the welterweight division, 2 top 5 ranked welterweights. And we'll say, okay, this is for the number 1 contender spot, at least for Belal Muhammad. Let's listen to what he said at the UFC 288 post-fight presser. Let's hear what he had to say about Belal Muhammad at 288 after the fact.
And we're safe to say Belal is fighting the winner of Leon versus Colby.
And what's that?
Belal.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, and the last one for me.
100%. 100% it's safe to say that Belal is getting the next title shot. I mean, think about how crazy that is. And this is where I'm talking about the Wolf tickets. This is where I'm talking about it because Dana will tell you any fight is a number 1 contender fight just to sell you a pay-per-view. That's what he's doing. He'll tell you this is a number one contender fight. That's a number one contender fight. Every pay-per-view, there's like a number one contender fight for a different division or the same division half the time. It makes no sense. So he lied to us fans and said this is a number one contender fight. And then he's now kind of going back on that now months later because, I don't know. I haven't even thought about that yet. Well, you already promised it back in May. And you had no problem promising it to Colby and acting like Colby was one of the best in the world. And I know people are going to act like, why do you care so much that Belal gets a title shot and act like I'm some type of Belal Muhammad fanboy? No, when I see a guy in Belal Muhammad who's been training and fighting for so long, he's on a 10-fight unbeaten streak because people don't like when you say 9-fight win streak because they say, there's no contest in there. He's on a 10-fight unbeaten streak. And he's beat the guys that he's beaten. He's earned his title shot. He's 35 years old. He's arguably in his prime, maybe heading towards a decline very shortly. Dedicated his entire life to this. This sport is supposed to have some, shred of meritocracy. And we have no other guy that truly deserves it more than him. And we already made him sit out for 9 months. We waited 9 months, by the way, to watch Colby get that title shot where he put on an absolute dog shit performance. We waited 9 months for that. We held up the division for that because Colby talks and he sells 400,000 pay-per-view buys. That's basically it. And to watch a guy who's dedicated his whole life to this, who's at the peak of his career, who's done everything, the kid's done everything we've ever asked of him, to step in on short notice against Gilbert Burns off the couch and dominate him in a 5-round fight and then not get his promised shot, even after a guy who was undeserving got it ahead of him, that is blatant Dana White privilege, and it is disgusting, and it is disturbing. And later on in this press conference, we're going to take a look at a couple more things. Later on, Dana is pressed on Colby Covington's inactivity. And we're going to take a look at a couple more things. We're going to expose the MMA media as well. We got to go back to the UFC 296 presser because he's asked about kind of the Colby Covington, Leon Edwards trash talk, and the Dricus Strickland situation. And he has some things to say that are then going to come back and kind of make sense. We're going to have to give context to later in the video. So let's take a look at this.
He thinks that I love when these type of things break it. No, I don't love it. And more importantly, the commission doesn't love it. And the commission is the government. So, no, we don't like this stuff, and we do everything in our power to make sure that it doesn't happen.
So there you go. Dana says, we don't like when these brawls break out. We don't like when this horrible trash talk at the presser happens, blah, blah, blah. We don't like it. We're regulated by the government. I wanted to play that because we're going to get back to that a little bit later when we talk about Colby Covington. I want to go through two more things, and I want to show how disgusting the landscape of the MMA media is. Listen to them ask a question about Sean Strickland. And then I already knew their reaction before I've even watched this. I hadn't had time to watch this. Somebody told me about this question in a live stream, and I said, I guarantee the way the media reacted. And sure enough, I checked. He was asked about, what do you think about Sean Strickland kind of asking to move the kids out of the way before he attacked Dricus? And listen to Dana's response and then listen to the media's response.
And it really showed tonight.
With the Strickland Duplessis thing, were you at least grateful that Sean asked the kids in between them to move out the way first?
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I mean, is that truly funny? They're laughing like they're at a stand-up comedy club. And the reason I want to point this out, and we're going to look at one more thing as well, is because the MMA media is glorified UFC publicists. They barely ever push back and ask any decent questions. Somebody should have been pushing back on Belal Muhammad's behalf and say, well, when he stepped in on short notice at 288, you promised him he was the number one contender. What makes you say I'm not thinking about it tonight? Or at UFC 286 in the post-fight presser, you committed to Colby getting the title shot on that very night. Why aren't you willing to commit to Belal Muhammad getting the next title shot? Why didn't anybody ask that? Because they're too busy laughing at, oh, Dana, you're so funny. You're so funny. Ha, ha, ha. Let's listen to one more question just to expose the MMA media because I just caught this and I have to share this with you. I just cannot believe how bad the state of MMA media is. Listen to this question. I don't know who this is, but absolute sycophant, disgusting, should be fired from their job for being so bad at their job. Listen to this.
I'm good. I'm going to leave.
Okay. Also, it's been a while since we've talked, but the Power Slap was approved in California. I'm just wondering if there's going to be an event maybe around UFC 298.
Yeah, so going into next...
I don't even care about Dana's response. She's asking about Power Slap. She could literally ask about anything, what's going on with 300. Why isn't Belal getting his guaranteed shot? Even though you look at the division, there's really nobody you can say deserves the shot more than him. And instead she's like, yeah, Power Slap got confirmed by California. Where else are you going in 2024 with Power Slap? And there was a bunch more kind of, brown nosing type questions at this press conference. But there was one decent question. And I think this was from Mark Raimondi. I think I could recognize his voice. So shout out to him for actually pushing back on Dana just a little bit, but he doesn't even get an answer. Let's take a listen to this. We got to skip way far ahead right here okay. So this is I believe Mark Raimondi asking about Colby Covington's inactivity, which was a great question.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm curious, the conversations you've had with Colby, because you mentioned that, waiting is a bad thing and the window is so small. And, he was really good. He was like right there with Usman, who was the pound for pound best in the world. And not only that, but he also sells. Like, people want to see Colby.
Yeah, he sells. He sold less than 400,000 pay-per-views against Jorge Masvidal, but he sells. Sells more than your average UFC fighter. That's about it.
Fight. Did you give him the indication of like why he hasn't, he's had these bouts of inactivity?
Why has he had inactivity? That is the question. Why has Colby Covington been inactive? Because earlier I showed you Dana White said, well, it wasn't us that asked him to sit out, so why has Colby been inactive then? Why has he been active? And let's see the answer we get, because it completely avoids the question, and then he answers another question kind of that shows a blatant hypocrisy from earlier tonight. Remember that quote. I want you to remember that quote where Dana says, well, yeah, we don't like when these things happen. We don't like when these brawls happen. We don't like this horrible trash talk. We don't like when it happens. Listen to what he has to say here. Doesn't answer the question at all, but listen.
That's actually a good point.
That's a good point, but I'm not going to fucking answer it. I'm going to go into some other spiel.
One of the things, this gentleman over here, I think, asked me about or one of you two, about what's too much and when it comes to, the trash talk. After that press conference or during, in the middle or whatever, pay-per-view shot up 25%. Literally, you can literally, and it wasn't.
How does that answer the question at all? Why has Colby been inactive? Yeah, pay-per-view pre-buys went up 25%. He goes on a little bit more. Let's take a listen.
Like our analytical team was basing it off YouTube views. They were basing it off actual pre-buys while the press conference was going on and ended.
Look at that shit-eating grin. Look at that shit-eating grin.
25%. Globally, too. Not just on ESPN. Globally, up 25%, which is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So, doesn't answer the question about why Colby's been inactive and says, yeah, the pay-per-view sales went up 25%, but yeah, we don't love that type of stuff. Dana White openly encourages this type of behavior because he does nothing to stop it. And I'm not saying cut fighters. I'm not saying even to fine fighters, even though he talks about, also in this post-fight presser, about finding Leon Edwards' team for going back and forth with Colby. Potentially, he didn't actually do it. But, I mean, this is just crazy. I mean, this is just blatant hypocrisy. This is an embarrassing display, and there's no media members really pushing back. Mark Raimondi asked a good question, didn't really push back. Well, that doesn't explain why Colby Covington has been inactive. And the whole reason I wanted to make this video, and that pretty much does it for the actual post-fight presser from Dana, is because Belal Muhammad needs to get his title shot. Dana White is a hypocrite, and if he's not called out by the fans, and not just me, I mean the fan base as a whole, plus the media holding him to account, which they never really do, he's just going to do whatever he wants. And I know chances are he's going to do whatever he wants anyway, but to a certain extent, they do listen to the fan base. And whether you like Belal Muhammad or not, or you think he's boring, or you think he's cringy, he deserves the next welterweight title shot. And he was promised the next welterweight title shot. And we wasted 9 months waiting for Colby Covington to get a title shot when turns out he's a 36-year-old washed up bum who can't even go out there and be aggressive at all. He didn't even try to fight. All he did was try not to get knocked out and memed online because he's an internet troll. We waited 9 months. We waited 9 months in the welterweight division to watch a washed-up Colby Covington fight for the belt when we could have saw Belal Muhammad, whether you like him or not, he would have showed up and he would have tried to win. He would have tried to win. And I think everyone should be rallying behind Belal Muhammad. I know that sounds crazy. I know people are probably like, oh, Joey, you're just such a Belal fanboy. He has worked for the last how many years to earn a welterweight title shot, all for Dana to be like, oh, I'm not thinking about that tonight. Well, that's not what you were saying when you promised a title shot back at UFC 288. That's not what you were saying when you promised Colby a title shot at UFC 286 post-fight presser. This just shows, and Dana White's denied it and denied it and denied it, Dana White privilege does exist. And I used to say this probably wasn't the case. I honestly wonder, Dana White has shown time and time again he is a Donald Trump sycophant. Colby Covington has shown time and time again that he is a Donald Trump sycophant. And while I know people are going to say, oh, Joey, you're getting into politics and you don't like certain people because of their political beliefs, I don't even know what their political beliefs are. All I know is they support certain candidates who they just shove down everyone's throat. And I'm thinking that had something to do with it, along with the fact that Colby Covington would sell slightly more pay-per-view buys than Belal Muhammad. And at the end of the day, the most important thing to Dana White is pay-per-view buys and the bottom line. But still, I don't know how we just throw everything away and make the UFC model a WWE model where only people who can sell the most pay-per-views are getting title shots. Imagine if the NFL did that. Imagine if the Super Bowl was just the two most popular teams. Imagine if the NBA did that. It would be disgusting and there would be pushback. We should all be advocating for Belal Muhammad to get the title shot that he deserves. And I think this post-fight presser, Dana White had to be exposed and the MMA media just wasn't willing to do it. And that's why I had to make this video. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.